I think we all agree he's replaceable, so we're done. I froze mid-step, my coffee slipping slightly in my hand, eyes darting between her and the group of friends laughing around the table in our kitchen. It wasn't supposed to be said aloud. Not like this, not like everyone could hear. And yet here it was, hanging in the air, clear and deliberate. Her voice carried the kind of confidence that comes from rehearsal, from validation, from knowing your audience will agree before you even finish the sentence. Sarah leaned back in her chair, nodding slowly, and Michelle raised her glass in silent agreement while my wife smiled. Relieved, like she'd finally said something she'd been holding back for months. I stood just outside the doorway, visible but ignored, processing the fact that my marriage had just been publicly ended without anyone bothering to tell me first. The laughter continued, light and easy, and I realized in that moment that I wasn't part of the conversation. I was the subject of it, discussed and dismissed like a topic that had already been settled. My chest tightened, my hands steadied the mug, and I didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there watching the woman I'd built a life with explain to her friends why I was no longer necessary. I don't move, don't speak. Just stand there as the conversation continues around me, like I've already left the room. Her friend Sarah leans in, saying something about finally taking control and how she deserves better. And my wife smiles, shoulders relaxed, body language open in a way I haven't seen directed at me in months. I watch her nod along, absorbing the validation like oxygen, and realize this wasn't a spontaneous decision made in the heat of conversation. This was planned, rehearsed, delivered to an audience specifically chosen to support it. Michelle adds something about how she'd been waiting for this moment, and Amy laughs, saying she knew it was coming, and I understand immediately that I've been the topic of multiple conversations I was never part of. The kitchen feels smaller, the air heavier, and I'm standing less than 10 feet away, fully visible, completely ignored. No one glances toward the doorway. No one hesitates. My wife reaches for her wine glass, takes a slow sip, and says something about feeling lighter already. And the group erupts in supportive murmurs that sound rehearsed, like they've been practicing this moment alongside her. I set the coffee down on the counter, the ceramic clinking louder than it should, and still no one turns around. I walk past the group without saying a word, my footsteps deliberate but quiet, and no one stops me. No one asks if I heard. No one acknowledges my presence at all. I head upstairs, close the bedroom door behind me, and sit on the edge of the bed, replaying the sentence over and over in my head, trying to understand when replaceable became the word that defined me in her eyes. The ceiling fan hums above me, the same fan we picked out together 3 years ago, and I stare at it, wondering how many other decisions we made together have been quietly undone in her mind without me knowing. I hear the laughter continue downstairs, louder now, more animated, like my absence confirmed their theory that I wouldn't fight back, wouldn't defend myself, wouldn't even ask for an explanation. My phone sits face up on the nightstand. No messages, no calls, no acknowledgement that anything significant just happened. I open our text thread and scroll back through the last few weeks. Short replies, delayed responses, questions that went unanswered or answered with single words. The pattern was there, obvious now in retrospect, but I dismissed it as stress, as work, as life getting in the way it does for everyone. Now it reads like a slow, deliberate exit strategy, executed quietly while I convinced myself everything was fine. Downstairs, the laughter continues, echoing up through the floorboards, and I realize they're not whispering, not concerned about whether I can hear them. They're comfortable. An hour passes, maybe more, and eventually I hear the front door open and close as her friends leave, their voices trailing off into the driveway, car doors shutting, engines starting. Footsteps on the stairs, slow and measured, and she appears in the doorway, arms crossed, expression neutral, and asks, "Are you seriously going to sulk?" I look at her, searching for some sign of awareness, some acknowledgement that what just happened downstairs was significant, and find nothing but mild annoyance. I ask her directly, my voice steady, "Did you mean what you said downstairs?" She hesitates, tilts her head slightly, and asks what I'm talking about. And I realize in that moment that she either doesn't know I heard, or she knows and doesn't care enough to address it without being forced. I repeat the words exactly, every syllable clear. "I think we all agree he's replaceable, so we're done." And watch her face shift from confusion to something closer to frustration, like I'm making an issue out of something that should have stayed private. She sighs, sits down on the bed beside me, and says, "You weren't supposed to take it that seriously. We were just talking. Just talking." The phrase sits between us like a wall, and I ask her how long she's felt this way, how long I've been replaceable in her mind, and she doesn't answer immediately. Instead, she looks at her hands, twists her wedding ring once, and says her friends have been telling her for months that I'm not present, not engaged, that I don't prioritize her the way I used to. I ask if she agrees with them, and after a long pause, she nods slowly, like admitting it out loud is a relief. I ask her why she didn't talk to me about it, why the first time I'm hearing this assessment of our marriage is through a doorway while she's announcing it to other people, and she shrugs, saying she didn't think I'd listen, didn't think it would change anything. The ceiling fan continues its slow rotation above us, and I realize we're having two completely different conversations. She's defending a decision she's already made, and I'm trying to understand when the decision was made without me. I stand up, walk to the closet, and pull out a duffel bag, the same one I use for weekend trips, and start packing. She watches, confused, asking what I'm doing, and I tell her I'm giving her exactly what she asked for, space to figure out if I'm actually replaceable or not. She laughs, sharp and disbelieving, saying I'm being dramatic, that I'm twisting her words, that this is exactly the kind of reaction that proves her point. I zip the bag, sling it over my shoulder, and walk past her without responding, and she follows me down the stairs, her voice rising, demanding I stop, demanding I explain myself, demanding I acknowledge that I'm overreacting. I reach the front door, keys in hand, and turn to face her, and for the first time in the conversation, she looks uncertain. I tell her I heard everything, not just the replaceable comment but the agreement, the validation, the laughter, and I'm not interested in debating whether I should feel hurt by it. I open the door, step outside, and close it behind me before she can respond. My phone buzzes in my pocket as I walk to my car. Texts already coming through, justifications, clarifications, accusations, but I don't check them. I drive to my friend Mark's place, the only person I know who won't ask questions I'm not ready to answer. And when he opens the door, takes one look at my face, and steps aside to let me in, I realize this is the first time in months someone has made space for me without requiring an explanation first. I stay at Mark's place that night, ignoring the 12 texts that come through before midnight. Most are clarifications, justifications. She didn't mean it like that. I'm overreacting, her friends were just venting. I'm making this bigger than it needs to be. One message stands out, sent at 11:47 p.m. "You're really going to make this a big deal?" I read it twice, then 3 times, and realize the question isn't whether I'm hurt. It's whether I'm going to inconvenience her by staying hurt. I don't reply. I silence my phone, set it face down on the nightstand, and sleep better than I have in months, dreamless and uninterrupted. The next morning, I wake to 17 missed calls, all from her, and a series of texts that escalate from confusion to anger to something resembling panic. I scroll through them slowly, methodically, and notice the shift in tone around the 4th message. She's no longer explaining, she's defending, no longer asking me to come home, she's demanding it. I screenshot every message, save them to a folder labeled simply with the date, and turn my phone off completely. Mark appears in the doorway with coffee, asks if I'm okay, And I realize I don't know how to answer that question yet. So I just say thank you and take the mug. Before we go deeper, tell us in the comments where you're watching from: Canada, Barbados, Guyana, Kenya, the United States, or the United Kingdom. We want to know. Let's continue. I spend the weekend at Mark's place, and for the first time in years I feel clarity. No texts to manage, no emotional labor to perform, no walking on eggshells around her mood or her friends' opinions of me. I realize how much energy I'd been spending trying to meet expectations that were never clearly defined, never explicitly stated, just implied through sighs and silences and conversations I wasn't part of. Mark doesn't ask questions, doesn't offer advice, just lets me exist in his space without requiring performance, and I'm grateful for it in a way I can't articulate. On Monday morning, I wait until I know she'll be at work, then drive back to the house and pack systematically. Clothes, documents, anything with my name on it. I move through the rooms quietly, methodically, and notice things I hadn't before. The photos on the wall that used to include both of us now lean toward group shots where I'm on the edge, easier to crop out. The bookshelf we built together now holds mostly her books, mine relegated to a box in the garage. I leave my keys on the counter, along with a single note written on the back of a grocery receipt. You said we were done. I'm respecting that. Her response comes within the hour. A series of frantic voicemails that shift between anger and confusion. The first three demand I come back immediately, accuse me of punishing her for a casual comment, insist I'm being childish and vindictive. The fourth is quieter, almost uncertain, asking where I went and why I'm not answering. The fifth stops me cold. She mentions that her friends are worried about how this looks, that I'm making her seem like the bad guy, that people are asking questions she doesn't know how to answer. Not that she's worried. Not that she regrets what she said. That it looks bad. I save the voicemail, add it to the folder with the screenshots, and don't respond. Instead, I reach out to a lawyer, not to file immediately but to understand my options. The consultation is straightforward and uncomfortably clinical. If she declared the marriage over in front of witnesses, and I have documentation of her confirming it afterward, the separation is justified, the timeline is clear, and I'm within my rights to proceed. I leave with a folder of paperwork, a business card, and a strange sense of relief that I'm not imagining this, that the hurt I feel is proportional to what actually happened. By midweek, mutual friends start reaching out, confused and concerned. Most of them lead with some variation of "what happened?" followed immediately by "she says you left over nothing." I respond to three of them, people I trust, and send the same message. Screenshots of her texts, the voicemail where she mentions how it looks, and a single sentence of context. This is what happened. Make your own judgment. Two respond immediately, apologizing, saying they had no idea, asking if I need anything. One goes silent, and I understand that silence as a choice, an alignment, a decision to believe her version without question. I don't follow up. I let the silence sit, let people reveal themselves through what they do next, and start to understand who was actually my friend versus who was just part of the social structure we built together. Jenna, one of her friends who wasn't at the gathering, calls me directly on Thursday evening, her voice tight and uncomfortable. She says Sarah let it slip that my wife had been joking about replacing him for weeks, that the announcement was supposed to be empowering, a moment of reclaiming control. Jenna asks if I actually heard it, and I confirm I did, standing right there in the doorway while they laughed. She goes quiet for a long moment, then says, "That changes everything." Jenna tells me something I didn't know, something that reframes the entire situation into something worse. My wife had been talking to someone else. Not physically, Jenna clarifies quickly, but emotionally. Long texts, late-night calls, the kind of attention and energy she used to give me, now redirected toward someone who worked in her office. The friend group knew. They encouraged it. They told her it was healthy to have options, to feel desired, to remember she wasn't trapped. The replaceable comment wasn't hypothetical or abstract. It was comparative. She'd been measuring me against someone else for months, and I was losing a competition I didn't know I was in. I hang up the phone, thank Jenna for telling me, and sit in my car in Mark's driveway for 20 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. For the first time since this started, I feel anger instead of confusion, betrayal instead of hurt, and I realize the woman I thought I knew stopped existing long before she announced we were done. I don't confront her immediately. I don't call, don't text, don't show up demanding answers. Instead, I stay silent. Let her messages pile up unanswered. Let her friends' concern grow in the absence of my response, and start documenting everything with timestamps, dates, and context. 2 weeks in, she shows up at Mark's door unannounced, and I know because Mark texts me from inside the house, asking if I want him to tell her I'm not there. I step outside instead, closing the door behind me, and she immediately starts crying, mascara already smudged like she'd been crying in the car before knocking. She says she didn't mean it, that her friends got in her head, that I'm abandoning her over a misunderstanding, that I'm being cruel by shutting her out without giving her a chance to explain. I let her finish, let the words spill out in a rush, and when she finally pauses to breathe, I ask her directly, my voice calm and even, "Are you seeing someone else?" She freezes, eyes widening, and the tears stop immediately, replaced by something sharper. She asks who told me that, and I don't answer, just wait, and her reaction is answer enough. The deflection, the immediate defensiveness, the refusal to just say no. It confirms what Jenna told me, confirms what I'd started to suspect, confirms that the replaceable comment wasn't about my failures, it was about her alternatives. I nod slowly, turn around, and walk back inside, and she stands on the porch for another 10 minutes before leaving, her car sitting in the driveway, engine running, before finally pulling away. She admits there's someone she's been talking to, but insists it's not like that, just a friend, just emotional support, nothing physical. She texts this at 2 in the morning, a long paragraph full of justifications and clarifications and reassurances that feel practiced, like she's been preparing this explanation for weeks. I read it twice, screenshot it, and ask a single follow-up question. Did you tell him we were done before you told me? She doesn't answer for 3 hours, and when she does, it's not a denial, it's another deflection, asking why I'm so focused on him instead of on us, on what we can fix, on moving forward. I don't respond. I add the screenshot to the folder, now over 30 images deep, and realize I'm not building a case for revenge. I'm building a case for clarity. If this goes further, if this becomes legal or public or contested, I want the truth on record, undeniable and complete, so that no one can rewrite what actually happened. Her friends start turning, slowly at first, then all at once. Sarah, the loudest advocate for my replacement, posts a vague story about supporting people through hard choices, and Jenna responds publicly by unfollowing her and posting her own story. Support doesn't mean enabling lies. The group fractures, and suddenly my wife's unified support system isn't so unified anymore. I receive a message from her mother, Carol, who I've always respected, asking what happened between us. I hesitate, unsure how much to share, then decide on transparency. I send her the screenshots, no commentary, no emotional appeals, just the facts. The announcement, the texts, the voicemail about how it looks, the admission about someone else. She replies 2 hours later with a message that hits harder than I expect. I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was capable of this. It's the first time someone from her side acknowledges the reality without defending her, without asking me to consider her perspective, without suggesting I'm overreacting, and it's quietly devastating. Carol calls the next day, and we talk for over an hour. She tells me she noticed changes in her daughter over the last year. A new distance, a new confidence that seemed less about growth and more about detachment. She asks if I'm okay, and I realize no one else has asked me that question without following it up with advice or judgment. I tell her I don't know yet, but I'm trying to figure it out, and she says that's enough for now. When we hang up, I feel something I haven't felt in weeks, validation that my response is proportional, that walking away wasn't weakness, it was survival. My wife tries a different approach after her mother reaches out to her. She offers counseling, a trial separation where we both work on ourselves, a reset where we start fresh and pretend the last month didn't happen. She sends this proposal in a carefully worded email, formal and measured, like she's negotiating a business arrangement instead of a marriage. I read it twice, then ask a single question in reply. Is he still in the picture? She takes 6 hours to respond, and when she does, she says, he's just a friend. And I realize she still doesn't understand why that's not the reassurance she thinks it is. A friend she confided in before me. A friend she compared me to. A friend who was part of the equation when she decided I was replaceable. I decline every offer in her email, point by point, and end with a single sentence. I'm not interested in being an option while you decide if I'm worth keeping. I block her number, her email, her social media, and for the first time since this started, I feel the weight lift slightly, the constant buzz of notifications replaced by silence that feels intentional instead of imposed. The divorce papers arrive at her address 3 weeks after I left, delivered by a process server on a Wednesday afternoon while she's at work. Her response is immediate and public, a social media post about betrayal and giving up without fighting, about how some people run instead of working through problems. The comments are mixed. Some of her friends rally with supportive messages, but others ask pointed questions she can't answer without exposing herself. Jenna comments directly, visible to everyone. Tell them what you said in your kitchen on January 8th. The post is deleted within an hour, but screenshots circulate, and the narrative she's been building starts to crack under the weight of details she can't control. I don't engage publicly, don't comment, don't add fuel to the fire. Instead, I send a final message to the mutual friends who've stayed neutral, the ones who've been watching from the sidelines without choosing sides. I never wanted this to be a spectacle. I just wanted honesty. If she's telling a different story, ask her about January 8th and what she said in front of Sarah, Michelle, and Amy. Then decide who you believe. 3 people respond within the hour, thanking me for clarity, saying they wish they'd asked sooner. 5 go silent, and I let them. Her lawyer reaches out, requesting mediation instead of litigation, and I agree on one condition: full disclosure of all communication with the other person, dated and time-stamped, submitted as part of the record. Her lawyer pushes back immediately, calling it unnecessary, invasive, irrelevant to the dissolution of the marriage. I hold firm, and my lawyer backs me, pointing out that if she claims the relationship is innocent and irrelevant, disclosure shouldn't be a problem. 2 days later, they agree. When the records arrive, the timeline is devastatingly clear. She'd been talking to him for 4 months before declaring me replaceable, and the messages escalated significantly the week of the announcement. Flirtation, validation, late-night conversations about what she deserved and what she was missing. Nothing explicitly physical, but the emotional affair was undeniable, documented in her own words, time-stamped and impossible to reframe. I read through the messages once, methodically, then close the file and don't look at them again. I don't need to. The evidence speaks for itself, and I'm not interested in torturing myself with details that won't change the outcome. At mediation, she's composed, apologetic, insisting the messages were emotional venting and nothing more, that I'm misinterpreting a friendship as something inappropriate. She looks directly at me when she says this, eyes searching for some sign that I might believe her, that I might soften, that the man she married might still be accessible beneath the anger. I don't look away, don't react, just let her finish her explanation while the mediator takes notes. My lawyer presents the timeline without commentary, the dates, the escalation, the comparison between her communication with him versus her communication with me during the same period. Her lawyer glances at her, visibly uncomfortable, and asks if she wants to respond to the timeline. She doesn't. She looks down at her hands, twists her wedding ring, and stays silent. The mediator asks if we can proceed with preliminary terms, and I nod. The session ends 90 minutes later with a draft agreement that's surprisingly civil. No contested assets, no drawn-out battles, just two people agreeing to end something that she'd already declared over months ago. I walk out knowing the truth is finally undeniable, documented and witnessed, even if she'll never admit it out loud. I move into my own place a month later, a small one-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from work, and the simplicity of it feels revolutionary. One couch, one table, no shared decisions, no compromised aesthetics, no photographs on the walls that require group approval. I set up the space slowly, deliberately, choosing things because I like them, not because they fit someone else's vision or someone else's friend's opinions. Mark helps me move the furniture, and when we're done, he cracks open 2 beers, hands me one, and says, "You look different." I ask what he means, and he shrugs, says I look lighter, less tense, like I'm not bracing for impact anymore. I realize he's right. The constant low-level anxiety that had become background noise in my life, the monitoring of moods, the anticipation of criticism, the management of expectations I couldn't see, has disappeared. I sleep through the night. I eat when I'm hungry. I exist without performance, and it's the first time in years I've felt like a person instead of a role. I don't post about the new place, don't announce a fresh start, don't engage with the lingering social media fallout that occasionally resurfaces when someone in her circle makes a vague post about loyalty or truth. I focus on work, reconnect with friends I'd neglected during the marriage, and start running in the mornings, something I used to do before she mentioned it annoyed her because I'd wake her up getting ready. Slowly, the weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying starts to lift. Not just emotional weight, but physical tension in my shoulders, tightness in my chest, the exhaustion that came from constant emotional labor. I sign up for a weekend hiking trip with people from work, something I would have declined automatically a year ago to avoid the questions about why I was going alone. And when I get back, sunburned and sore and genuinely happy, I realize I haven't thought about her in 3 days. It's not victory, not closure, just distance, and distance feels like progress. One evening in late February, Jenna texts me, "She's seeing him openly now. Thought you should know." I thank her for the heads up and realize I don't feel anything. No anger, no betrayal, no vindication, just distance. The woman who declared me replaceable replaced me, exactly as she said she would, and the only difference is I'm no longer waiting to see if she'd change her mind, no longer hoping for an apology that reframes everything, no longer accessible for the performance of reconciliation. I delete the text, finish my dinner, and go for a run, and by the time I get back, the information has settled into irrelevance. What she does now, who she's with, how her friends justify it. None of it touches me anymore. The divorce finalizes 6 weeks later, processed quickly because neither of us contested anything, and I receive the final decree in the mail on a Tuesday afternoon. I read it once, file it in a drawer with the rest of the paperwork, and go back to work. No celebration, no ceremony, just a legal confirmation of something that had already ended the moment she announced it to her friends. Carol reaches out one more time, months after everything is settled, asking if I'd be willing to meet for coffee. I agree, curious but cautious, and when we sit down, she apologizes, not on her daughter's behalf, but for not seeing it sooner, for not intervening when she noticed the changes, for assuming marriage problems were private and she shouldn't interfere. I tell her she has nothing to apologize for, that she's been one of the few people who treated me like a person instead of a problem to be managed or a narrative to be corrected. She asks if I'm doing okay, and I realize the answer is yes, genuinely, without qualification. I tell her about the new place, the hiking, the work projects I've taken on, the friendships I've rebuilt, and she smiles, says she's glad, says I deserve to be treated better than I was. When we part ways, she hugs me, and I realize it's the first time someone from that entire chapter of my life has acknowledged my humanity without asking me to soften my response to protect someone else's reputation. I run into Sarah at a coffee shop in April, completely by accident, and the recognition is mutual and immediate. She freezes, coffee in hand, and I nod politely, ready to move past without engagement. She stops me, asks if we can talk for a minute, and I agree, more out of curiosity than goodwill. She apologizes, says she didn't understand the full situation when she encouraged my wife, that she'd been told a version of events that made me sound absent and emotionally unavailable. She says seeing the timeline in mediation documents. Apparently my wife had shown them to her, trying to build a case for sympathy. Made her realize she'd been part of something cruel. I don't absolve her, don't tell her it's okay. Just acknowledge the apology and say I appreciate her honesty. She asks if I'm doing better and I say yes and mean it. When she leaves, I realize I don't carry anger toward her anymore. Just a clear understanding that some people will believe the loudest voice in the room without asking questions. And that's a choice they have to live with, not me. Summer comes, and with it, a rhythm I didn't know I was building. Work trips I say yes to without checking with anyone. Weekends planned around my schedule. Friendships that exist because I want them, not because they're part of a shared social obligation. I take a week off in July and drive up the coast alone, staying in small motels, hiking trails I've never heard of, eating at diners where no one knows me. On the fourth day, sitting on a beach at sunset, I realize I'm not running from anything anymore. I'm just living, deliberately and intentionally, without the constant background noise of someone else's expectations. My phone buzzes with a text from Mark. How's the solo trip? I send back a photo of the sunset and a single word, perfect. He responds with a thumbs up, and I put the phone away and sit in the silence until the sun disappears completely. That night, sleeping in a motel room that smells like salt air and old carpet, I sleep 10 hours straight, dreamless and complete. I hear through mutual friends that she's engaged by September, less than a year after the divorce finalized. The news comes secondhand, delivered carefully by someone who isn't sure if I'll want to know. And I realize I don't feel anything about it. No bitterness, no vindication, no sense of having dodged something. She made her choice, I made mine, and we're both living with the consequences. What surprises me is the lack of surprise. Of course she moved quickly. Of course the replacement was already lined up. Of course the narrative she built required immediate validation through a new relationship. I thank the person for telling me, say I hope she's happy, and mean it in the most neutral way possible. Not as bitterness disguised as politeness, but as genuine disinterest in her outcomes. That evening, I delete the folder of screenshots from my phone, the evidence I'd carefully compiled and never needed to use publicly. I don't need it anymore. The truth is already established, documented legally, understood by the people who matter, and I'm not interested in relitigating the past to people who weren't there. I start dating again in October, cautiously and without expectations. Not because I'm looking for replacement or validation, but because I'm ready to be around people who choose to be around me, who engage with me as I am instead of as a project to be fixed or a role to be filled. The first few dates are awkward, surface level, fine but forgettable. The fourth one is different. A woman named Rachel who works in urban planning and talks about her projects with genuine enthusiasm, who asks questions and actually listens to the answers, who laughs at herself when she spills coffee on her shirt and doesn't make it a referendum on the entire evening. We see each other again, and then again, and I notice something I'd forgotten was possible: ease. Conversation without subtext. Humor without edge. Presence without performance. I don't tell her about the marriage for 3 dates, and when I finally do, I keep it simple. It ended, it was difficult, I'm past it. She nods, asks one clarifying question, and then moves on to something else, and I realize not everyone treats your past as a narrative that needs dissecting. By November, I'm in a rhythm that feels sustainable instead of temporary. Work is good, steady, challenging in ways I enjoy. Friendships are deeper, built on reciprocity instead of obligation. The apartment has become home, filled with things I chose, decorated in ways that make sense to me, organized around my life instead of someone else's aesthetic. I host Thanksgiving for a small group. Mark, Rachel, 2 friends from work, Jenna, and the evening is easy, warm, full of laughter that doesn't require alcohol or performance to sustain it. As I'm cleaning up later, Rachel beside me drying dishes, she mentions casually that I seem content, and I realize she's right. Not happy in the explosive, temporary way, but content in the sustainable, foundational way. Pleased with the life I'm building. Comfortable in my own decisions. No longer waiting for permission or validation or approval from someone who'd already decided I wasn't worth keeping. I tell her thank you, and she smiles, and we finish the dishes in comfortable silence. And it's the most ordinary, unremarkable moment, and it feels like everything. December comes, and with it, the anniversary of the announcement. 1 year since I stood in that doorway and heard myself declared replaceable. I don't mark the date intentionally, but I notice it when it appears on my calendar, and I take a moment to sit with how different everything is now. A year ago, I was frozen, confused, questioning whether I'd misread everything. Now I'm clear, grounded, building something that belongs to me. The contrast is staggering, not because my life is perfect, but because it's mine. I'm not performing for an audience that's already decided I'm inadequate. I'm not managing someone else's narrative about who I am. I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the criticism to come, for the friends to weigh in on whether I'm measuring up. I'm just living deliberately and intentionally, and the simplicity of that feels revolutionary. I text Carol, checking in, and she responds immediately, asking how I'm doing. I tell her I'm good, genuinely, and she says she's glad, and we make plans to meet for coffee in January. When I hang up, I realize she's one of the few remnants of that chapter I'm glad to keep. Not because she's a connection to my ex-wife, but because she's a connection to my own decency, my own worth, my own humanity that she saw when others didn't. Rachel and I have been seeing each other for 3 months when she asks me directly what I learned from my marriage. We're sitting in her living room, snow falling outside, and the question doesn't feel invasive, just honest. I think about it for a long moment, then tell her the truth. I learned that silence can be a form of cruelty, that public humiliation disguised as honesty is still humiliation, and that walking away from someone who's already decided you're not enough is not weakness, it's self-preservation. I learned that love doesn't justify disrespect, that friendship groups can become echo chambers that validate cruelty, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is refuse to fight for someone who's already chosen someone else. She listens without interrupting, then asks if I regret leaving. I tell her no, I regret not seeing the truth sooner, not trusting my instincts when the pattern first appeared, not valuing myself enough to walk away the moment I was publicly dismissed. She nods, reaches for my hand, and says, "I'm glad you value yourself now." And I realize that's the difference. Not that I found someone new, but that I rebuilt the foundation of how I see myself, separate from anyone else's assessment. Walking away didn't feel like victory, only clarity. I didn't fight for someone who'd already decided I wasn't worth keeping, and I didn't beg to be chosen by someone who'd spent months choosing someone else. I respected the boundary she set when she declared us done, even though she said it publicly, cruelly, and without warning. I documented the truth, protected myself legally, and rebuilt my life around values that matter to me. Honesty, reciprocity, respect, presence. I don't regret leaving. I regret not hearing the truth sooner, not recognizing the pattern when it first appeared, not trusting the tightness in my chest that told me something was wrong long before I had words for it. But I learned, and I grew, and I built something better on the other side of that announcement. Think about your own choices when the world seems to decide for you, when the people around you declare your worth without asking your input, when staying means accepting a narrative that diminishes you. Think about what it truly costs to stay when you should walk away, and what it means to choose yourself when no one else will. I chose myself. I chose clarity over comfort, truth over reconciliation, self-respect over the performance of a marriage that had already ended. And on the other side of that choice, I found a life I actually want to live, with people who see me as I am and choose me anyway. That's not revenge. That's not even closure. It's just the quiet, deliberate act of refusing to be replaceable in my own life. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. Have you ever walked away from someone who'd already decided you weren't enough? What did that choice cost you, and what did it give you? Let's talk about it. And if you stayed for this entire confession, subscribe, because there are more stories like this, more truths people don't say out loud waiting to be told.